Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Ramadan Journey. I am your host, Afif Khan, and accompanying us on our journey is Sheikh Muhammad Al-Asi. He is the author of the Ascendant Quran. Currently, we have 7 volumes in print. We expect, inshallah, by the end of the year that we'll be up to 10 volumes. And the explanation will go through to the end of Surah Al-Ma'idah. Sheikh Al-Asi is already into the middle of the Quran, and we expect that within the next 2 or 3 years we'll be able to catch up to his progress. Again, there's no better person to explain how this tafsir is valuable to us today in the modern times, how it really shows us that the Quran is the facts of life. And so we're going to delve a little bit more deeply into what some of the analytical components are of this tafsir. And so with that, welcome to the program, Sheikh Muhammad.
My honor.
What we'd like to start with in this program is you've said in the past that as far as each ayah in the Quran is concerned, it consists of 2 parts. There is the manqul, or the text, and there is the ma'qul, and the human understanding of the text. Could you explain what you mean?
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين رحمة الله للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه المهتدين. Yes, there's something in Islamic scholarly literature that has looked at the Quran, the meanings of the Quran, the text of the Quran, and they classified the understanding of the Quran along 2 lines. One of them is called al-manqul, and what this practically means is that we understand what the ayah is telling us, and we will throw in, if we find the material, what the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him and his, said about this ayah. And that's not going to be very much, because there's no such thing as, in as far as the literature that we have, the Prophet explaining the meanings of these different ayat. In other words, the Prophet himself did not have a tafsir. And the reason for that being is that the people who were around didn't need that tafsir. You know, they understood the general meanings of the ayat, and understanding those general meanings was enough for them to do what they had to do.
And then they had the perfect model who implemented the meanings.
They had the Prophet who would, lead them in their decisions. So that is basically al-manqul. Al-ma'qul of the meanings of the Quran is, in addition to al-manqul, there is a mental, enlightening effort to extract further meanings from the verses of the Quran and from the hadiths of the Prophet within that context. Unfortunately, the way the way Islamic history developed is that as the centuries went by, there was a type of friction that developed between those who are strictly going by the textual quote of the Quran, and those who added to that their mental labor in understanding the meanings of the Quran.
Are there any sort of organizational analogs to what you're talking about? That there's some people that emphasize this and some people that emphasize that. Are there any?
Well, in Islamic history, actually, we can look back and say that this came to a type of a conclusive parting of ways between the Mu'tazila and the Ash'ariyya. The Mu'tazila stood for the Ma'qul, and the Ash'ariyya stood for the Manqul.
Mm-hmm. Right. Are there any contemporary inheritors to those positions?
Well, yes, there is. I mean, if you look at today's world, you'll find that there is a sponsorship of what is called the Manqul approach to the Quran by those who have a lot of wealth in the Arabian Peninsula. The Islamic institutions that are spread out in the world, whether they are masajid, whether they are Islamic centers, whether they are schools, whatever they are, they have a program to more or less restrain the human intellect from expanding the meanings of these ayat in the Quran. And therefore we really suffer, we the Muslims in the world suffer from a rigorous intellectual presentation of the meanings of the Quran.
And we're going to continue this discussion about how to understand some of the important words and the concepts that they are related to in the Quran, but at this point we have to take a break. Please stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Welcome Ramadan. Welcome Ramadan.
And welcome back. We're talking about some aspects of the Ascendant Quran. Let's now move to some rather misunderstood words and thereby concepts in the Quran. One of these words that's really butchered is the word kufr, and butchered in translations, and sometimes these translations roll back into Arabic and even the Arabic meaning gets diluted. So you've said in the past that there's no such thing as kufr without there also being a concept of iman, or said in other words that kufr is the counter momentum to iman. So can you explain what's meant by this?
Yes. In the first instance, I would like to say that kufr does not translate into disbelief, as is the choice of word for that translation. So, I mean, it's very hard, being that there are many books that are published, and there are many articles that are written, and almost everyone, uncritically, without giving it a second thought, realizes that you can't say kufr is disbelief.
Is that how the Arab mind understands it also?
Well, unfortunately, yeah, because what happened in the Arab mind is that the Arabic speakers, because of their own history, I can't go into that right now, because of their own history, they were subjected to a form of educational alienation from the Quran. And that resulted in colonialism and imperialism setting up their own educational institutes, the secular schools and universities all around the Arabic-speaking countries.
Sort of like a language blowback into the Arabian world.
And so what the Arabic-speaking people began in the last 100 or 200 years, what they began to understand of the meanings of the Quran is what was explained to them by Orientalists who basically wrote the curricula for the school systems all around the Arabic-speaking countries.
And these are the people that took words like kufr and...
Yeah, they took the word kufr and they more or less tried to explain it the same way a non-Muslim would understand it, and that is disbelief.
Right, in the European sort of like binary context of belief and disbelief.
Yeah.
Right.
But let's part for now for a moment with the word kufr and just take the word disbelief. What does that mean? For all practical purposes, what does that mean? I always ask myself, these people who use these words, haven't they thought about what they're using, what they're saying? Many Muslims, and some of them well accomplished in their own fields, when it comes to this idiom, when it comes to this vocabulary, they almost, automatically and without a second thought, they go ahead and say, they know the original Quranic ayah and the word kufr in it and all this, and when it comes to English, you say it's disbelief. What are you talking about? What is this? It's like trying to force an alien word and its definition on the original definition and word that is there in the Quran. So even the Arabic-speaking people, hopefully right now we are probably in the midst of a type of intellectual reawakening, and hopefully this will change in the coming years. But up until now, it's just the general definition that came to us via colonialist and imperialist mechanisms in our educational systems that have the Arabic speakers themselves understanding the definition of their own Arabic words as is explained to them by their own enemies. Anyway, so now we go back to the word kufr. What does the word kufr mean? Okay, how do we explain this? And this is the translator's challenge. Do you express this by just using the word kufr, almost forcefully introducing it into the English language? Because there are words that migrated from other languages into other languages. This is in the nature of languages in the world. You have words that move from one language into another language. And so in this respect, should we move the word kufr, with an explanation? We explain to begin with what it means.
We have dictionaries.
You can put it in the dictionary,
right.
And then it becomes one of those words that made its presence known in the English language. But you'd have to explain what the word kufr means. And when you trail the many ayat in the Quran that have the word kufr in them, you will find that it is an elaborate and a thought out discourse, political, ideological, philosophical, that is meant to exclude Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as authority and power in man's life. That is kufr. It's basically a mental concept and an argument, and it could be very elaborate. In the ideological sense of the word, this is where it's concentrated. And then you have it in many philosophical discourses, and also in political theories. All of these come together and represent what kufr is.
Does it exist by itself? Or is it in a reaction to something?
Yes, the word. This is another thing that I think Muslims should be aware of. Not only intellectuals and scholars, but the average Muslim out there. They should be aware of the usage of the word kufr appears in the revelation, in the context of revelation, along with the word iman. And so, to begin with, there's, as far as individuals and people who are committed to Allah, when they become committed Muslims, when they become mu'mineen, then there are others who are going to have to take a stand vis-a-vis these committed Muslims. And depending on what type of stand they take, they gain a description and a designation. In this instance, the kafirs or kufr is juxtaposed with iman or with mu'mineen. But in the absence of iman and mu'mineen, I mean, you could have objection to Allah, objection to His authority, objection to His power, but that would not be called kufr. There are other terminologies that apply to that, but in this case, iman and kufr, and you'll find this: الذين آمنوا, الذين كفروا, إن الذين آمن ثم كفر ثم آمن ثم كفر. You know, there's a play on these two polar opposites. Suffice it to say, if there is no iman, we cannot say that there is kufr. And so kufr is contingent on the expression of iman. And maybe if I have a little more time in the coming segment or in the coming program, I'll try to maybe expand this a little further.
Yes, this is a challenging discussion on kufr, and we expect to go into it in a little bit more detail. But right now we have to take a break. We'll be right back. Please stay with us.
Welcome Ramadan. Welcome Ramadan.
Welcome back. We've been having a discussion about the concept of kufr, and we're going to expand on that a little bit more in this segment. And as you continue with your explanation, I'd just like you to append a little bit onto that explanation with an answer to the following questions. With the explanation that you've given thus far, is it okay to characterize the average Joe on the street, regardless of what religion he adheres to? Is it proper to characterize that person as a kafir? And then, is it proper for Muslims to characterize other Muslims as kafirs?
A short answer to that is no.
Okay.
You can't do that, but it needs a little explanation here. So when we took these two concepts, kufr and iman, we can place them in certain ayat in the Quran. One ayah in Surah Al-Kahf says, وَقُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. And say, Al-Haqq is from your sustainer, and so whoever wants to commit themselves to Allah may do so, and whoever wants to deny Allah may do so. Now the commitment and the denial are specifically concentrated on Allah's authority and power. Because if a person affirms Allah's mercy or compassion, and another person argues with or denies Allah's compassion or mercy, that's an issue that you can argue on back and forth. It's not an issue that is solidly an issue of kufr. Because as we said previously, there are attributes of Allah that have to do with Jalal and attributes that have to do with Jamal. And this latter argument may fall into that cleavage. But when it comes to generic Iman and generic Kufr, human beings are given the freedom of choice to become committed to Allah or to deny that commitment to Allah. And remember, this is in theory. When it comes to the way people think or the way they pledge their lives and themselves. And Allah has given freedom along these lines. And no one says just because someone agrees with an idea that is opposed to Allah, then they become the types that should lose the right to live and become targets, as has become the case with certain ignorant types of Muslims. Kufr, in this sense, is allowed because it's just a theory. It's not something that's in practice. That being said, though, there is a transformational nature to kufr. Even though kufr in its definition is the denial of Allah's power and authority in theory, it's not static. It doesn't stay like that. It has a way of working itself out into practice.
To a kind of a social momentum.
That's right. It becomes policies, it becomes administrations, it becomes establishments, power structures in the world. It eventually becomes that. It wasn't that to begin with. But its incipient state is called kufr. But then its developed presentation becomes dhulm.
And that's something which is punishable.
Yeah, that's something that becomes very serious, and it has ramifications and consequences. And there's an ayah in the Quran says, وَالْكَافِرُونَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. And the kafirs, and here is where the transformational content is, they are zalims. They're not zalims by the simple fact that they agree to a theory in opposition to Allah. They are zalims because they put that theory into practice, which turns out to be dhulm, and at that point there's action to be taken.
We're going to continue this discussion. There's a lot more to be said on this topic. But we've come to the end of our time on this particular program. We do thank you for joining in with us. We're going to continue our Ramadan journey, same place, same time. And my name is Afif Khan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.